Vancouver. Under Indigenous laws, traplines passed down from generation to generation come with rights and responsibilities to care for the land. Trappers are stewards, always thinking about conservation, explained Dunza Cree trapper Bud Napoleon in an interview Tuesday. Napoleon's family has a trapline in Treaty 8 territory in northeastern BC. Dunza Cree trapper Bud Napoleon said trappers are stewards, who are always thinking about conservation. Anna Skew submitted, "We borrowed a land from our children, so we've got to leave something for them," he said. But Canadian law is failing them, a new report argues. The report, called Caretakers of the Land and Its People, is set to be released Wednesday by West Coast Environmental Law. It was written collaboratively by environmental lawyers, who were approached by Indigenous trappers wanting to protect their traplines from encroaching development, and some of the trappers themselves. Article continued below. Jessica Claude, West Coast Environmental Law's executive director and senior counsel, called it a wake-up call. Indigenous peoples have been stewarding and managing their territories for millennia, and in many Indigenous traditions, trappers have rights and responsibilities to care for their trapline territories, in a way that goes far beyond just taking resources or trapping for pelts, she said. It's really a more holistic way of exercising a whole variety of what we would call Aboriginal rights: to hunt, to fish, to pass on cultural information to their children. The inherent rights that they have are grounded in their own law, she said. They're also protected under Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution and in Napoleon's territory by Treaty 8. Read more. Hunters demand quota to cull thousands of seals to save salmon population along BC's coast. How tiny, remote Haida taught a lesson on achieving Indigenous sovereignty. Article continued. Belawanchant, BC. Indigenous settlement to become outdoor history classroom. On the ground reality, though, is that these rights aren't being upheld in many cases, the report says. Claude put it bluntly, Canadian law is failing trappers who are working so hard to protect their family traplines and really to care for the land and water that matters for all of us. It's death by 1,000 cuts, not one thing, she said. It's seismic lines, hydroelectric, logging. Often when development is proposed, trappers aren't even involved in the conversation, she said. Napoleon estimated about 60% of his trapline has been logged out. Dunza Cree trapper Bud Napoleon on his trapline, which has been impacted by industry in Treaty 8 territory in northeastern BC, submitted, Anna Skew, when that happens, the moose leave, so do the deer and the bears and the fur-bearing animals he traps. There's no place a marten can live out in the open field when it's been logged out. They need that shelter, he said. If I had the money I would have taken them to court to stop all this destruction. Beyond the impact of resource development, BC's trapline laws, under the Wildlife Act, are sometimes inconsistent with Indigenous approaches, the report explains. Holders of registered traplines are expected to use their trapline regularly and must take 50 pelts or animals worth a value of $200 each year, it says. For Indigenous trappers, however, their traplines are about more than trapping. It's like a family sanctuary, Napoleon said of his family's trapline. They use it for family picnics, for picking berries and medicinal roots, and for hunting. Siemchen, a Coast Salish trapper whose English name is Richard Billy, doesn't trap his family's trapline at all. He and his late wife Anna used the land to pick berries and medicines and cedar bark for baskets and traditional regalia, he said. Decades of logging ruined the area for trapping, he said. So when the trapline was passed to him, and Anna asked if he was going to trap, Siemchen said no, we gotta let it reforest and the animals will come back. He's quoted in the report. The experiences of Siemchen and Napoleon illustrate what West Coast Environmental Law called an urgent need to better align Canadian and Indigenous law on traplines, in order to uphold Aboriginal and treaty rights and protect the environment from the cumulative impacts of industrial development. To do that, the report outlined several recommendations, including that all levels of government should recognize and uphold Indigenous laws when considering anything, such as resource development, that could affect trapline territories. The report authors also call for Indigenous-led or co-governed regional assessments in land use planning processes to manage cumulative impacts in these territories. Ultimately, they say, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples must be fully implemented, land use decision-making should be rooted in nation-to-nation relationships, and recognize Indigenous rights of self-determination. Ainsley Cruikshank is a Vancouver-based reporter covering the environment. Follow her on Twitter, @AinsCruikshank.